Hey guys, tonight we're going to gently peel back the romantic, fairy tale veneer of medieval Europe. We're not talking about knights in shining armor or damsels in distress waiting in ivy-covered towers. Instead, imagine the crunch of straw under your feet on a cold, dark morning. Picture the smoky haze that fills your one-room home, the scent of damp earth and livestock clinging to your clothes. This isn't a fantasy epic, it's the gritty, uncomfortable, and often smelly reality of daily life for the vast majority of people who lived 1,000 years ago. And let's be honest, given the lack of coffee and Wi-Fi, you probably wouldn't survive the first morning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always nice to know who's out there listening in the quiet hours, so feel free to drop your city or country and what time it is for you in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the darkness. It's not the gentle, city light-polluted darkness you're used to. This is a profound, inky blackness, thick and almost tangible. There are no alarm clocks, no gentle chimes, no glowing red numbers to reassure you. Your waking is prompted by a subtle shift in the air, a rooster crowing somewhere in the distance, or perhaps the rustling of your family members who share this single, small space with you. You're not sleeping in a plush bed with a memory foam mattress. You're on a straw-stuffed pallet on the hard-packed earthen floor. The straw, which hasn't been changed in a while, is lumpy and prickles your skin through your thin woolen tunic, which you've been wearing for days. It also hosts a lively community of fleas and other tiny, uninvited guests. You try to scratch an itch on your back without waking the person sleeping soundly, and perhaps a little too closely, next to you. Privacy is a concept that hasn't been invented yet, at least not for your social class. A cold draft snakes its way through the wattle and daub walls of your hut. These walls, made of woven lattice and covered in a mixture of wet soil, clay, sand, and straw, are decent insulators for their time, but they're no match for a damp, pre-dawn chill. You can smell everything. The lingering smoke from last night's fire, which has no proper chimney and simply escaped through a hole in the thatched roof. The sour scent of unwashed bodies. The nearby breathing of the family cow or a few goats, who often shared the living space for warmth and for their protection from thieves. It's a rich, earthy, and deeply unfamiliar aroma. Welcome to your medieval aromatherapy session. You sit up, your joints aching. The floor is cold and unforgiving beneath your bare feet. You don't reach for your phone, you reach for your shoes. They are simple leather-turned shoes, crudely stitched and hardened by cycles of damp and dry. Putting them on is a necessary first step before facing the day and the floor. The central hearth is just a collection of gray ashes. Someone, probably your mother or father, is already moving about, using a flint and steel to try and coax a new flame to life from the embers. The process is slow, frustrating, and sends up puffs of acrid smoke that make your eyes water. There are no light switches here. The only light comes from the struggling fire, casting long, dancing shadows that make the familiar shapes of your one-room home seem strange and menacing. Now for breakfast. Or what passes for it. Don't expect a colorful bowl of fruit, a stack of pancakes, or even a simple piece of toast. Your morning meal, if you get one at all, is likely a chunk of hard, dark bread. This isn't artisanal sourdough from a weekend farmer's market. This is bread made from rye or barley, dense and coarse. It's stale because it was baked days ago, and you have to chew it vigorously. You might dip it into some small ale or cider to soften it. This ale is watery and low in alcohol, consumed by everyone, including children, because it was often much safer to drink than the local water. Historians still argue whether the common medieval person truly ate a dedicated breakfast. Many believe that for a peasant, the first meal of the day was a scant affair, or that you might even be expected to head out to the fields to begin your work on a completely empty stomach, saving your energy and your food for a larger meal later in the day. The idea of a hearty, most important meal of the day was a luxury reserved for the nobility. Your workday is tied directly to the sun, a relentless and non-negotiable supervisor. The concept of a 9-to-5 workday is a distant, futuristic dream. The mainstream historical fact for your life is that your labor begins at sunrise and ends at sunset, a schedule dictated entirely by the seasons. In the summer, this means brutally long days of toil. In the winter, the shorter days are a small mercy, but the work is often colder and harder. There is no commuting. You just step outside your door and you're at work, because the fields you farm are likely just a stone's throw away, belonging not to you, but to the lord of the manor. Before you head out, you might take a moment to relieve yourself. There's no ensuite bathroom. You'd use a simple chamber pot, a piss pot, as it was bluntly called, which would then be unceremoniously emptied out into the street or the garden patch. It's a quirky but universal tidbit of life that highlights the complete lack of modern sanitation. It's just another part of the morning routine. No brushing your teeth, no shower, no doom scrolling through social media. Just the cold, the dark, the stale bread, and the long day of backbreaking labor stretching out before you as the first faint, gray light begins to creep over the horizon. You push aside the rough woolen blanket that serves as your door and step out into the morning. The air is still cold, but now it carries a new bouquet of overwhelming scents. This is where your journey into the world of filth truly begins. The concept of a paved road, or even a tidy gravel path, is pure fantasy. What you step into is a river of mud. It's a thick, greedy, ankle-deep sludge that seems to have a life of its own. The street is not a street in the way you understand it. It's more of a communal trench, a repository for everything the village needs to discard. And it discards everything right here. Remember that chamber pot from a few moments ago? You and everyone else in the neighboring huts have just emptied its contents into this very thoroughfare. So, as you trudge through the muck, you are navigating a slurry of human and animal waste, discarded food scraps from last night's meager dinners, and general, unidentifiable refuse. Chickens peck hopefully at bits of vegetable peel, and a large, hairy pig trots past you with a grunt, acting as the village's unofficial and highly unsanitary garbage disposal unit. This is a very quirky but true tidbit of medieval life. Pigs were often allowed to roam freely in towns and villages, consuming much of the organic waste that would otherwise pile up. It's a system that is both efficient and profoundly unhygienic. The mud squelches and slurps around your simple leather shoes, and you know from bitter experience that a careless step could suck one right off your foot, lost to the mire until a drier day. You pull your woolen cloak tighter around you, not just for warmth, but as a subconscious barrier against the smells. The primary scent is of damp, decomposing earth, but woven through it are the sharper, more pungent notes of ammonia from urine and the general funk of rot. This is the origin of the historical belief in miasma, the mainstream idea that diseases were spread by bad air. People genuinely believed that foul odors could carry sickness, that you could literally inhale an illness from a pocket of particularly smelly air. To combat this, wealthier individuals might carry a pomander, a small metal ball filled with fragrant herbs, spices, or ambergris, which they would hold to their nose when passing through a particularly ripe area. You, however, have no such luxury. Your preventative measure is to breathe shallowly and try not to think about it too much. It's an amusingly incorrect theory by modern standards, but it accidentally encouraged behaviors, like seeking fresh air or cleaning up smelly messes, that sometimes did help prevent the spread of germs, albeit for the wrong reasons. Let's talk about your personal hygiene, or the conspicuous lack thereof. You haven't had a proper bath in, well, you can't quite remember. Bathing is a major event, not a daily routine. For a peasant, it might happen once or twice a year, if you're lucky. It requires heating large amounts of water, which is a huge expenditure of time and precious firewood. When it does happen, the entire family might use the same tub of water, one after another. By the time the last person gets in, the water is a lukewarm, gray soup. Forget scented soaps and shampoos. You might use a coarse block of lye soap, which is harsh on the skin, or perhaps some fuller's earth or specific herbs like soapwort that create a mild lather. Public bathhouses did exist in some larger towns and cities, a holdover from Roman times. But their reputation was often complicated. Historians still argue whether they were seen primarily as places for getting clean or as social hubs for gossip, business dealings, and sometimes less than reputable activities. By the later Middle Ages, many were shut down, partly due to their association with vice and partly because of the fear that they helped spread disease, especially during plague outbreaks. So, for you, in your small village, such a place is irrelevant. Your daily cleaning routine consists of maybe splashing some cold water on your face and hands from a wooden basin just outside your hut. There's no dental care. People clean their teeth by rubbing them with a rough cloth, maybe with some salt or soot as a primitive toothpaste. As a result, tooth decay was rampant, and a toothache was a terrifying affliction that often ended in a crude and agonizing extraction. Your hair is greasy and likely home to lice, a common and accepted part of life. You might comb it with a carved piece of bone or wood, which does more to tidy it than to clean it. There is no deodorant, of course. The scent of human sweat is just part of the ambient aroma of life, mingling with the smoke, the mud, and the livestock. You are accustomed to your own smell and the smell of others. It doesn't register as offensive, it's just normal. It's a strange thought to be so intimately familiar with the unmasked scent of every person you know. In a way, it's a form of connection we've completely lost, and maybe that's for the best. After all, nobody wants to be known for their particularly earthy aroma at the village gathering. Your modern nose would be in a state of perpetual shock, but for you, this is just the smell of home. This world of filth is your world. Every step is a negotiation with the muck, a reminder that the line between your living space and a waste pit is very, very thin. Having survived your morning commute through the village's signature mud, you now find yourself at your place of work, a long, narrow strip of land in a vast open field. You don't own this land, of course. It belongs to the lord of the manor, and you work it in exchange for your right to exist on your little plot and in your little hut. The sun, your tireless supervisor, has climbed higher into the sky. Hours of back-breaking work have already passed, plowing with a heavy wooden plow pulled by a straining ox, or perhaps sowing seeds by hand from a leather pouch, or weeding with a crude hoe. Your muscles burn, your stomach growls, and your mind is focused on one thing, the main meal of the day. When the sun reaches its zenith, a brief respite is granted. You straighten your aching back and join the other workers, finding a spot at the edge of the field to sit. This is your lunch break. There's no cafeteria, no food truck, no prepackaged sandwich. Your meal arrives, likely brought from the hut by your wife or one of the older children. And what is on the menu today? The same thing that was on the menu yesterday, and the same thing that will be on the menu tomorrow. You are about to dine on a medieval classic, pottage. Let's be clear about what pottage is. It is not a gourmet soup. It's a thick, hearty, and profoundly simple stew that serves as the culinary foundation of your entire existence. The base is almost always oats or barley, boiled in water until it becomes a thick, porridge-like mush. Into this pot goes whatever is available from your small personal garden. This usually means onions, leeks, and cabbage. If you're lucky, maybe a carrot or a turnip. These vegetables are chopped coarsely and thrown in to soften and meld into the grainy slurry. The pot is kept on the fire for most of the day, with new ingredients being added as they become available. Some have called it the eternal stew, a pot that's never truly emptied, just perpetually topped up. A delicious concept, I'm sure. You eat it not from a fine ceramic bowl, but from a rough wooden one, scooped up with a wooden spoon. Face is bland. Utterly and completely bland. Spices like pepper, cloves, or cinnamon are fantastically expensive, worth more than their weight in gold, commodities you have only ever heard of in stories. They are for the Lord's table, not yours. Your primary seasoning is salt, which is a vital necessity but can still be costly and is sometimes controlled by the very Lord you work for. The other flavor notes in your pottage come from the vegetables themselves, and, if you are having a truly spectacular day, a piece of bacon or salted meat might have been thrown into the pot to add a hint of savory richness. The discovery of a tiny morsel of meat in your bowl is a moment of genuine excitement, the medieval equivalent of finding a prize in a cereal box. Accompanying your pottage is the second pillar of your diet, bread. Remember the coarse, dark loaf from this morning? You have another hunk of it now. This bread is your fuel, your primary source of calories. It's heavy, substantial, and requires serious jaw work. Sometimes, you don't even get a bowl for your pottage. Instead, you use a trencher. This is a thick, flat slab of day-old bread, which serves as your plate. You'd ladle the hot pottage onto the trencher, and the bread would soak up all the juices. It's a wonderfully quirky and practical invention, an edible plate. After you've finished the stew, you can eat the gravy-soaked bread itself. Or, if you're feeling generous or the bread is particularly hard, you might give it to a beggar or toss it to the dogs. Waste not, want not. This brings us to the mainstream historical fact of your diet, the triad of pottage, bread, and ale. That weak, watery ale we mentioned this morning is here as well, your constant companion. It quenches your thirst, provides some extra calories, and remains a safer bet than drinking water from a stream that might be contaminated. This simple, repetitive menu is what powers your world. Meat is a luxury for feast days, like Christmas or Easter, when the Lord might provide a pig or a cow for the village. Fresh fish is only an option if you live near a river and have the right to fish in it, a right that is often restricted. You might keep a few chickens, so eggs are an occasional treat. It sounds bleak, and in many ways it is. The lack of variety, the constant blandness, the scarcity of fresh fruit and protein. And yet, there is a fascinating discussion on this very topic. Historians still argue whether the average peasant's diet led to chronic malnutrition or if it was, in some ways, surprisingly healthy. While certainly deficient in certain vitamins, the diet was high in fiber from whole grains and vegetables, and almost entirely free of the refined sugars and processed fats that plague modern health. You're not at risk of the diseases of excess that we face today. Your problems are diseases of deficiency. Scurvy from a lack of vitamin C could be a real problem in the winter when fresh greens were unavailable. But for the most part, this simple, earthy diet gave you the raw energy needed to perform hours of grueling physical labor, day in and day out. It's not exciting, it's not delicious, but it keeps you going. And as you scrape the last of the pottage from your wooden bowl, the sun beats down, signaling that your brief respite is over. It's time to get back to work. The sun is hot on your back as you bend once more to the earth. The pottage sits heavy in your stomach, a slow-release fuel for the afternoon's labor. As you work, you become acutely aware of your clothing. It's not a fashion statement. It's a functional, uncomfortable, and semi-permanent part of your skin. Let's do a quick wardrobe audit, shall we? Your main garment is a tunic, known as a coat or a kirtle. It's made of wool. Not the soft, luxurious merino wool of modern sweaters, but a coarse, heavy, and incredibly itchy fabric. This is because the wool comes from hardy, everyday sheep, and the processing is rudimentary. The constant friction provides a sort of aggressive, unwanted exfoliation service all day long. But wool is what you wear because it's durable, insulating even when damp, and readily available. Underneath this temple of itchiness, you have a linen undergarment. For you, a man, this would be a simple shirt and a pair of braise, wonderfully baggy linen undertrousers that look a bit like pajama bottoms. If you were a woman, you'd be wearing a long linen shift or chemise that reaches to your ankles. This linen layer is a small mercy, providing a buffer between your skin and the wool, but it's still a far cry from soft cotton. It's rough spun and feels more like a sturdy dishcloth than something you'd want against your skin. On your legs, you might wear hose, which are like separate stockings for each leg, tied to the drawstring of your braise. They are also likely made of wool and have a tendency to sag around your ankles in a way that is definitively not stylish. The whole ensemble is held together at your waist by a simple leather belt or a bit of rope, which is also useful for hanging a small knife or a pouch. Now let's talk color. Your wardrobe is a stunning display of what we might call 50 shades of beige. Your clothes are the natural, undyed colors of the materials they're made from. The off-white and yellowish tones of linen, and the gray, brown, and black of sheep's wool. Bright colors are a mark of wealth. Dyes were expensive, derived from plants, insects, or minerals, and the process of dyeing fabric was labor-intensive. A flash of dull red from the madder plant or a bit of faded blue from woad would be considered quite fancy for someone of your station. Vibrant colors like deep crimson, rich purple, or brilliant scarlet were reserved exclusively for the nobility and high-ranking clergy. This wasn't just a matter of economics, it was the law. This brings us to a major historical fact of medieval life: sumptuary laws. These were regulations that controlled what people of different social classes could wear. A peasant caught wearing silk, velvet, or certain forbidden colors could be fined or punished. It was a way of making the social hierarchy visible and legally enforced. The fashion police were, in fact, the actual police. So you wear your drab, functional clothing not just because it's all you can afford, but because it's what you are supposed to wear. It is a uniform for your station in life. Of course, your clothes aren't exactly fresh off the rack. They are likely patched in several places, the threads of a different shade, showing where a tear has been mended. They might have been handed down from an older sibling or your father. Washing is a monumental task. You can't just toss them in a machine. It involves a trip to the nearest river, a great deal of scrubbing with a harsh lye soap, and beating the garments against rocks to get the dirt out. This process is hard on the fabric and is done as infrequently as possible. As a result, your clothes carry a history of your life in their very fibers. The smell of wood smoke from your hut, the sweat from your labor, the dirt from the fields, and the general ambient aromas of the village we discussed earlier. And you never, ever leave the hut without something on your head. This is a quirky but essential tidbit of medieval dress code. For a man like you, it would be a coif, a close-fitting white linen cap that ties under the chin, looking a bit like a baby's bonnet. It's practical, keeping the sun off your head and your hair out of your eyes. For a woman, a head covering like a wimple or a simple scarf was even more important, as a married woman showing her hair in public was considered improper or even scandalous. Headwear was universal, a fundamental part of getting dressed. As you toil away, the sheer weight and texture of your clothing is a constant presence. But do these simple, drab garments serve any purpose beyond pure function? Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of peasant clothing was for simple utility and protection, or if even the poorest people found ways to express identity through their attire. Perhaps the way you tie your belt, the type of stitching on a patch, or a slight variation in the cut of your tunic could signal to others if you were married, from a particular village, or held a slightly higher standing, like a reeve or a skilled craftsman. It's a subtle language of threads, a silent conversation in a world where most people couldn't read or write. For you, though, as you wipe sweat from your brow with a rough woolen sleeve, your clothes are simply what they are, a heavy, itchy, smelly shield against the world. The afternoon wears on, a long, slow grind of repetitive motion under the hazy sun. Suddenly, a sharp pain flares in your side, or perhaps a wave of dizziness washes over you, leaving you weak and shivering despite the heat. Maybe you simply nicked your hand with your harvesting sickle, a small cut that, in your world, is anything but simple. Sickness and injury are constant companions in this life. A common cold can turn into a fatal pneumonia, a small wound can fester into a raging infection, and a fever is a terrifying omen. You can't just call in sick or pop a few ibuprofen. Now, you must face the bewildering and often terrifying world of medieval medicine. Your first stop isn't a doctor's office. You might seek out the local wise woman, an elderly villager who has a deep knowledge of herbal remedies passed down through generations. Some of her poultices and infusions might actually work. Willow bark, for instance, contains salicin, a natural pain reliever related to aspirin. But many other remedies are based on superstition, involving strange rituals or ingredients that are less than appealing. Think less, soothing chamomile tea, and more, a plaster made from goat dung and honey. If your ailment is more serious, you might make a journey to the nearest monastery, where a monk known as an infirmerer tends to the sick with a combination of prayer and medicine. But regardless of who you see, their diagnosis and treatment will almost certainly be based on the mainstream medical theory of the day, the four humors. This idea, inherited from the ancient Greeks, is the absolute foundation of your medical reality. It holds that your body contains four essential fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A healthy person has these four humors in perfect balance. Sickness is simply a sign that you have too much or too little of one. If you have a fever, you're considered to have an excess of blood, making you sanguine. If you're coughing, you have too much phlegm, making you phlegmatic. It's like a personality quiz from hell that ends with a dubious prescription. The primary goal of any treatment, therefore, is to restore this balance. And the most common way to do that, especially for a suspected excess of blood, is bloodletting. This is the go-to cure for nearly everything from fevers and headaches to general malaise. A practitioner, perhaps a monk or even a barber surgeon, will take out a small, sharp knife called a lancet and make a neat incision in a vein on your inner arm. They will drain a specific amount of your blood into a bowl, the quantity determined by your sickness, age, and the time of year. If you're squeamish about being cut, no problem. They can use leeches instead, placing the writhing creatures on your skin to suck the excess humor out. You just lie there, feeling woozy and weak, trusting that this draining of your very life force is somehow making you better. It sounds barbaric, and it is. Yet there is a sliver of debate on its effects. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of bloodletting was universally harmful, likely killing more patients through shock and anemia than it ever cured, or if in some very rare, specific instances, like for someone with dangerously high blood pressure, it might have coincidentally provided a moment of relief. For you, however, it's just a terrifying, painful, and profoundly weakening experience. For more hands-on procedures, you would visit a barber surgeon. These jacks of all trades could give you a haircut, pull a rotten tooth, set a broken bone, or even amputate a gangrenous limb. Notice the barber part of the title. It wasn't uncommon for the man who trims your hair to be the same one who wields the bone saw. You might get a 2-for-1 special on a trim and a minor surgery. This is all done without anesthetic, save for a swig of strong alcohol or a wooden stick to bite down on. There is no concept of sterile instruments. The same knife that just lanced someone else's boil might be used to dig into your wound. And just when you think it can't get any stranger, they might bring out a chart. A quirky but vital tidbit of higher-level medieval medicine was the zodiac man. This was a diagram of a human body with each part linked to a sign of the zodiac. Physicians believed that the heavens directly influenced the body, and it was considered extremely dangerous to perform a procedure on a body part when the corresponding astrological sign was in the wrong alignment with the moon. So, your surgeon might consult his almanac and say, "I can't possibly treat that wound on your leg today. The moon is in Aquarius. We'll have to wait 2 weeks." It was a system that combined medicine, astrology, and a healthy dose of what we would call pure superstition. So you lie there on a dusty pallet, hoping the herbs work, praying the bleeding stops, and trusting that the stars are, quite literally, aligned in your favor. That lingering fear from your sickness, the memory of lying on your straw pallet feeling weak and helpless, is just a quiet hum compared to the roaring terror that is now sweeping across the land. It starts as a whisper, a traveler's tale from a distant port city, so horrifying that it sounds like an exaggeration. A story of a pestilence so swift and deadly it leaves entire towns silent. You dismiss it at first, but then the whispers get closer. A neighboring village is afflicted. The parish priest speaks of a great judgment from God. Fear, thick and suffocating, begins to settle over your village like a winter fog. You don't know that it's a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, and you don't know it travels on the fleas that infest the black rats hiding in the grain shipments. You only know it by its results, the great pestilence, the Black Death. One day, your neighbor complains of a headache and a fever, much like the one you might have had. But then comes the swelling. A hard, painful lump, a bubo, appears in their groin or armpit, growing with alarming speed. Dark splotches, the tokens of God, bloom across their skin. The fever rages, they become delirious, and within a few days they are gone. The swiftness is what's most terrifying. The person you shared a joke with on Monday is being buried in a hastily dug pit on Wednesday. The only thing that spreads faster than the sickness is the panic. Social bonds, the very fabric of your small community, dissolve overnight. People bolt their doors. A child's cough from the hut next door sends a spike of cold dread through you. Families abandon their own sick, leaving food and water outside the door, too terrified to enter. The village priest, who preached of courage and faith, might be the first to flee, or he might fall ill himself while trying to give last rites. The mainstream fact of this period is its sheer, unimaginable mortality. The plague swept away at least a third of Europe's population in just a few years. In some regions, it was closer to half or even more. The world is quite literally ending around you. Those who can try to protect themselves with methods born of desperation and the medical theories you know. Remembering the idea of miasma, you hold bundles of pungent herbs to your nose. You burn foul-smelling leather or green wood in your hut, hoping the thick smoke will drive away the bad air. From the cities, you hear tales of plague doctors. This is a quirky and now iconic image of the era. Figures clad in long, waxed coats, gloves, and a terrifying beaked mask. This wasn't just for a scary aesthetic. The beak was packed with aromatic herbs, spices, and dried flowers, a sort of portable air purifier meant to filter out the deadly miasma before it could be inhaled. It's the height of medieval personal protective equipment. You live in a state of constant, gnawing anxiety. Every morning you wake up and check your own body for the telltale swellings. You eye your family members with suspicion. Is that a flush on your child's cheek from playing, or the first sign of the fever? The fields lie untended. The lord of the manor is locked in his stone keep, or perhaps he has already succumbed. There is no authority, no help. Historians still argue whether the mortality rate was a consistent catastrophe across the continent, or if some fortunate, isolated regions managed to escape the worst of its wrath, becoming lonely islands of the living in a sea of death. For you, trapped in your village, such academic questions are meaningless. All you know is the sound of the death cart creaking down the muddy lane and the ever-present fear that your family will be next. Years pass. The great wave of pestilence recedes, leaving a changed and emptier world in its wake. The fields are overgrown, entire families have vanished, but you have survived. You are one of the fortunate few. Life, slowly and painfully, begins to resemble something normal. The work is harder now, with fewer hands to share the load, but there's also more land to go around. For a brief moment, it seems like things might be getting better for those who remain. But the ambitions of the powerful have not been diminished by plague. One afternoon, as you're trying to repair a fence, a man on horseback arrives in the village. It's the Lord's Reeve, accompanied by a hardened-looking man-at-arms. He isn't here to see how you're recovering. He's here to call the levy. Your lord is going to war. It's not some grand crusade for a holy cause. It's a petty dispute with a neighboring baron over a few acres of woodland, or a perceived insult at a feast, or a squabble over inheritance. And you are expected to fight in it. The core tenet of the feudal system, a fact that underpins your entire existence, is that in exchange for land and protection, you owe the lord military service. This is typically for a set period, often 40 days a year. It's the worst kind of short-term contract imaginable. You have no choice in the matter. Refusal means severe punishment or being cast out, which is a death sentence of a different kind. So you prepare for war. Don't imagine a shining suit of armor and a noble steed. Your armor is a gambeson, a thick, padded jacket made of quilted linen or wool. It's smelly and heavy, but it might just stop a glancing blow from a sword. You are expected to provide your own weapon. You don't have a sword. You have a wood axe, or perhaps you've crudely attached your harvesting scythe to a longer pole. Your farm tool has just received a battlefield promotion. Some peasants are trained as archers, but they are specialists who practice for years. The quirky tidbit here is the sheer physical power they possessed. Skeletal remains of English longbowmen show they had massively overdeveloped left shoulders and arms from the strain of drawing bowstrings with a pull weight of over 100 pounds. You are not one of these men. You are simple infantry, a body to fill the ranks. You say goodbye to your family, a knot of dread in your stomach. You have no idea if you'll ever see them again. You join a motley group of other peasants from your village and the surrounding manors, a shambling, poorly equipped column of farmers and blacksmiths, not soldiers. You march for days, sleeping on the cold ground and eating whatever meager rations are provided. The mood is sullen and fearful. You're not fighting for a king or a country, you're fighting because your lord is angry at another lord. When you finally arrive at the site of the conflict, perhaps a small, fortified manor house they intend to siege, the reality of your role becomes clear. Historians still argue whether these peasant levies were considered genuinely effective fighting forces or if their primary role was as a disposable workforce. Were you meant for the front lines, or were you mostly there to dig latrines and trenches, forage for food, and form a large, intimidating crowd to make the Lord's army look bigger than it was? In truth, it's probably a bit of both. You are, in the bluntest terms, cannon fodder. If a battle does occur, you will be pushed to the front, a human wall to absorb the initial charge of the enemy's knights, while the real, armored professionals fight behind you. Your chances of survival in a real skirmish are slim. You just grip your makeshift spear, your knuckles white, and pray that your 40 days are up before the real fighting begins. Whether you return from the Lord's pointless war unscathed or manage to avoid the summons altogether, you come back to the same unchanging reality. You survived the plague, you survived the levy, but you will never survive the social hierarchy you were born into. You are a worker, a laborer, a peasant. And in this world, that is all you can ever be. Your life is governed by a rigid structure, often simplified as the three estates: those who pray, those who fight, and those who work. The clergy and the nobility are the top two tiers, and you, along with millions like you, form the vast, foundational base that supports everything else. The social ladder is missing most of its rungs, especially at the bottom. This structure is a mainstream historical fact known as the feudal system. It's a complex web of obligations, a pyramid scheme of power where land is exchanged for service. The king grants land to his most powerful barons, who in turn grant smaller parcels to lesser lords or knights, and at the very bottom, you are granted a few strips of land in the village fields to farm for your own family. In return, you work the Lord's personal land, his domain, without pay. This quirky, specific obligation is known as corvée, labor. For 2 or 3 days every single week, you are not working for yourself. You are working directly for the Lord. Tending his crops, repairing his buildings, digging his ditches. It's a labor tax, paid in sweat and aching muscles. There is no upward mobility. You cannot work hard and become a knight. You cannot save up and buy your own grand estate. Your status is determined by your birth. You are a serf, which means you are legally bound to the land. You are not a slave to be bought and sold, but you cannot leave the manor without the Lord's permission. If the manor is sold to a new lord, you and your family are part of the package, like the buildings and the livestock. Your world is small and circumscribed. The idea of moving up in the world might literally mean being allowed to farm a slightly less rocky strip of land next year. You are acutely aware of your place. When the Lord or his lady rides past, you must stop your work, remove your cap, and bow your head in deference. You do not speak unless spoken to. Their clothing is rich with colors you are forbidden to wear, made of fabrics you will never touch. They are, for all intents and purposes, a different species of human. Their concerns are about politics, inheritance, and honor. Your concerns are about whether there will be enough rain for the barley crop and if you can fix the hole in your roof before winter. This rigid system seems absolute, but was it truly so simple? Historians still argue whether the neat, three estates model was an accurate reflection of society, or if it was a simplified ideal created by the educated elite. This model largely ignores the growing class of merchants, skilled artisans, and freedmen in the burgeoning towns and cities. These were people who existed in a gray area, not fighting, not praying in a clerical sense, and not working the land. They were a sign that the old order was, ever so slowly, beginning to change. But for you, out here in the rural heartland, that change is invisible. Your life is defined by the soil you till, the Lord you serve, and the unshakable knowledge that you are at the bottom of a vast, unmoving pyramid. The hierarchy that defines your life is not just an abstract concept. It is enforced daily with a brutal and highly visible system of justice. On market day, the village is more crowded than usual. People gather not just to trade a few eggs for a bit of pottery, but for the day's main event, a little public punishment. This is justice as a spectator sport. Today, a local baker who was caught selling loaves of bread that were lighter than the legal standard has been sentenced to the pillory. He is locked by his head and hands into a wooden framework in the center of the square, a target for public scorn. The crowd jeers, children point, and people throw whatever refuse they have on hand: rotten vegetables, mud, animal dung. It's a messy, humiliating, and highly effective deterrent. Don't cheat your neighbors. This form of public shaming is a cornerstone of medieval law. The goal isn't rehabilitation, it's retribution and deterrence, plain and simple. For a more serious crime, like poaching one of the Lord's deer, the punishment is far more severe. You might be taken to the gallows at the crossroads, or branded on the cheek with a hot iron, marking you as a thief for life. Your criminal record isn't a piece of paper in a file, it's a permanent scar on your skin. For theft, a common punishment was maiming, the removal of the hand that stole. The cruelty is the point. It serves as a visceral reminder to everyone of the consequences of stepping out of line. In some places, especially in the earlier medieval period, you might encounter an even stranger form of justice: the trial by ordeal. This quirky and terrifying practice was based on the belief that God would directly intervene to show who was innocent. An accused person might be forced to carry a red-hot bar of iron for a set distance. Their hand would be bandaged, and if after 3 days the wound was healing cleanly, they were declared innocent. God had protected them. If it was festering, which it almost always was, they were guilty. Another famous ordeal was trial by water. The accused would be bound and thrown into a river. If you sank, you were innocent, though you might drown before they pulled you out. If you floated, the water was rejecting you, and you were declared guilty. It was the ultimate, terrifying trust fall with the divine. These punishments were not carried out behind closed doors. The mainstream fact is that justice was a public performance. Executions, whippings, and stints in the stocks were scheduled for market days to ensure the maximum possible audience. It was a day's entertainment, a grim festival that broke the monotony of rural life. But what did the common person truly feel while watching? Historians still argue whether these brutal spectacles were genuinely popular, a form of community bonding and folk entertainment where people reveled in seeing justice done, or if they were deeply resented as terrifying displays of the Lord's power, forcing people to participate in cruelty they secretly feared. As you stand in the crowd, watching the baker suffer in the pillory, a bit of both feelings might churn within you. There is a sense of grim satisfaction that a cheat is getting what he deserves. But there is also a cold knot of fear. You know how easy it is to fall foul of the myriad rules that govern your life, and you know that the justice of your time is swift, painful, and has a long and unforgiving memory. The Lord's law, with its pillories and branding irons, governs your physical life. But a far greater power governs your soul and dictates the rhythm of your entire existence. The church. In the center of your village, or perhaps on a nearby hill, stands the parish church. It is likely the only stone building you see on a regular basis. Its tower reaches higher towards the sky than anything you can imagine, a constant, solid presence that dwarfs your tiny wattle and daub hut. This building is the physical and spiritual heart of your world. Your understanding of the universe is shaped entirely by what you hear from the parish priest inside that church. You cannot read the Bible for yourself. Literacy is a rare skill reserved for the clergy and the very wealthy. So you listen to sermons describing the eternal battle between good and evil, the glories of heaven, and the horrifying, fiery torments of hell. These are not abstract concepts to you. They are destinations as real as the next village over. You are taught about purgatory, a place where souls not quite pure enough for heaven go to be cleansed through suffering. The fear of damnation is a constant, powerful motivator in your life. The list of potential sins you could commit feels impossibly long. The power of the Catholic Church in this era is the single most important historical fact of the age. It is a unifying, international institution in a fractured continent of squabbling lords. The church calendar dictates your year. You don't think in terms of January or February, you think in terms of the time before or after Easter, of Michaelmas, of the feast day of a particular saint. These holy days or holidays are the only real breaks you get from the endless cycle of labor. They are days of feasting and celebration, but they are religious in nature. The church also demands fasting on certain days and during certain seasons, like Lent, when you must abstain from meat and dairy, further shaping your diet and daily routines. And then there is the tithe. You are required by divine law to give 1/10 of everything you produce to the church. 1/10 of your grain, 1/10 of your vegetables, every 10th animal born. It's the original subscription service, and you cannot opt out. This is a heavy burden on a family that already lives on the edge of subsistence, but it is an obligation you fulfill out of a mixture of genuine faith and profound fear. The parish priest is the most powerful man in your village, an arbiter of God's will who holds the keys to your eternal salvation. Your faith is deep and sincere, but it's also interwoven with folk beliefs. A quirky but common aspect of medieval faith was the cult of relics. You might hear of a nearby monastery that possesses a holy relic, the finger bone of a saint, a splinter from the true cross, or a vial said to contain the milk of the Virgin Mary. People believed these objects possessed miraculous powers. You might save for years to make a pilgrimage to such a shrine, praying for a cure for your sick child or for a better harvest. Historians still argue whether the average peasant truly understood the complex Latin theology being preached from the pulpit, or if their everyday faith was a more practical blend of official Christian doctrine and much older, pre-Christian folk traditions and superstitions about good luck charms, protective spirits, and the turning of the seasons. For you, praying to a saint for your aching back feels just as natural as leaving out a bowl of milk to appease a mischievous house spirit. It is all part of the same spiritual tapestry that you use to make sense of your difficult, uncertain life. Life under the church's long shadow is demanding, a cycle of obligation, sin, and tithes that weighs heavily on your spirit. But that same religious calendar that demands so much from you also provides your only real moments of escape. The holy days, the holidays, are your salvation from the relentless grind. On these rare days, the entire village puts down its tools. The air, usually thick with the seriousness of survival, suddenly feels light. Today is one of those days, perhaps the festival for your village's patron saint, or May Day, a celebration vibrating with the energy of spring. The perpetual gloom lifts, and for a few precious hours, you are allowed to experience joy. The village green, normally a muddy patch of grass for grazing, is transformed. A makeshift archery contest is set up at one end, though the bows are crude and the targets are simple straw bundles. A wrestling ring has been cleared, where young men grapple and test their strength, their laughter echoing in the air. There is drinking. The weak, watery ale of your daily life is supplemented by a stronger brew, and it flows freely. The Lord might even provide a cask as a gesture of goodwill, a small price to pay for keeping his workforce content. The blandness of your diet is forgotten as a pig roasts on a spit, its fat crackling and dripping into the fire, filling the air with a scent so delicious it's almost agonizing. For today, you will eat your fill of fresh, hot meat. This temporary abundance creates a giddy, almost reckless atmosphere. But the real excitement begins when you hear the sound of a drum and a pipe approaching on the road. A ripple of anticipation moves through the crowd. Traveling entertainers have arrived. This is a mainstream fact of your world. Entertainment is almost always itinerant. Minstrels, acrobats, jugglers, and storytellers journey constantly from village to village, from castle to castle, carrying news, songs, and a sense of the world beyond your own small patch of earth. They are your television, your internet, and your celebrity gossip magazine all rolled into one. Anything is better than another thrilling evening of watching your turnips grow. The performers are a motley crew. A man with a colorful, patched tunic and a quick smile juggles wooden clubs with surprising skill. A woman with bells on her ankles tumbles and dances. But the main attraction is a grizzled man with a lute and a voice that can be both booming and tender. He is the minstrel, the storyteller. He sings tales of heroic knights like Roland, of the great King Arthur and his court, of star-crossed lovers and cunning tricksters. You stand mesmerized, leaning against a tree, completely transported by his stories. These are tales of a world of honor, magic, and adventure, so far removed from your own life of mud and toil that they might as well be from another planet. For a little while, you can forget the ache in your back and the dread of tomorrow's labor. Sometimes these troops bring an even greater spectacle, a trained animal. A clever dog that can walk on its hind legs, or the ultimate prize, a dancing bear. The bear, muzzled and leashed, is coaxed to its feet by its handler to shuffle and sway in time with a drumbeat. It's a strange and slightly sad sight to modern eyes, but to you, it is pure, breathtaking magic. You've never seen a bear this close, and the idea that such a powerful, wild creature could be made to dance is a source of endless wonder and discussion. You imagine its owner has to pay it handsomely, probably in honey and a decent dental plan. These festivals represent a temporary loosening of the rigid social order. This is taken to its extreme in a quirky and controversial celebration known in some parts of Europe as the Feast of Fools. Held around New Year's, it was a day of sanctioned chaos, the original opposite day, where social roles were hilariously inverted. A lowly servant might be elected the Lord of Misrule to preside over the festivities, and a junior cleric could be named bishop for a day, leading a parade of parishioners in a parody of the solemn Massachusetts. It was a day of wild, often crude, satire. But what was the real purpose of these rowdy pleasures? Historians still argue whether these festivals acted as a social safety valve, a controlled explosion of merriment that allowed peasants to blow off steam, making them more accepting of their lot and thus reinforcing the social order. Or were they something more dangerous? Were these moments where, fueled by ale and a sense of temporary freedom, subversive ideas could be shared, and resentment against the endless work and the Lord's authority could quietly grow? As you laugh at a jester's crude joke about a greedy nobleman, you might feel a flicker of both. It's a release, but it's also a reminder of what you're being released from. For now, though, you don't think about it. You just take another drink of ale, tap your foot to the music, and enjoy this brief, shining moment of pleasure. The festival buzzes around you, a rare and welcome chaos of music, food, and laughter. In the midst of the celebration, you see young men and women eyeing each other, sharing jokes and stolen glances. The minstrels sing of knights and ladies falling into passionate, all-consuming love at first sight. You listen to these songs, but you know they are fantasies, as distant and unattainable as the silk clothes the nobility wears. For you, the process of finding a life partner has very little to do with romance and everything to do with survival. Your marriage will not be a love story, it will be a business transaction. This is the primary historical fact of marriage for your class. It is a practical contract. Your future spouse is chosen not by your heart, but by your parents and the hard-headed logic of peasant life. As a young man, you have reached an age where taking a wife is expected. You need a partner to share the immense burden of work, to manage the household, and, most importantly, to produce children who will one day help in the fields and care for you in your old age. Your parents are already in negotiations with another family from your village, or perhaps one nearby. What are they looking for in your future bride? Her beauty might be a pleasant bonus, but it is far down the list of priorities. Is she healthy? Is she strong? Does she come from a family with a good reputation for being hardworking and not quarrelsome? Can she cook, spin wool into thread, mend clothing, tend a garden, and milk a cow? These are the skills that matter. Her family's assets are also a major consideration. Does her father have a healthy ox? Is he willing to include a few extra chickens, a brass cooking pot, or a good woolen blanket as part of her dowry? These things, which seem so minor to us, are a significant transfer of wealth and can make a real difference to your new household. Her best feature might just be her father's well-maintained plow. From the perspective of the young woman's family, they are looking for a similar set of practical advantages in you. Do you have a legitimate claim to inherit your father's strips of land? Are you known to be a diligent worker? Or are you lazy and fond of spending too much time at the alehouse? Are you reasonably healthy and not prone to a violent temper? Your ability to provide and maintain a stable home is your primary selling point. This is a merger of two small, struggling family businesses, and the goal is to create a new, viable unit. Before any of this can be finalized, there is one more crucial step. You must get permission from the lord of the manor. Because you are a serf, bound to his land, he has a say in who you marry. Usually, his permission is granted upon the payment of a fee, a tax known as a merchet. It's a bitter reminder of your status, that even your most personal life choices are subject to the approval and financial benefit of your master. It's like paying a cover charge just to start a family. But where is the affection in all of this? The romance from the songs? Historians still argue whether the emotional bond we call love was entirely absent from these arranged peasant unions, or if it was simply understood differently. It was not the spark that ignited the relationship, but a slow-burning ember that, with luck, might grow over a lifetime of shared labor, shared hardships, and shared joys. A quiet companionship forged in the crucible of survival was the most you could hope for. The passionate, heart-stopping love of the knight and the princess was not for you. In some places and times, a curious courtship custom known as bundling might have existed. This quirky practice allowed an engaged couple to spend time together in bed, but with a bundling board or a large bolster placed between them. They would remain fully clothed, the board a physical barrier to ensure propriety was maintained. It was a strange intersection of intimacy and control, a way to build a connection in a world that offered very little privacy, all while being conducted under the most heavily chaperoned circumstances imaginable. So, as you watch a young woman across the green, the very one your father has been speaking about, you don't feel the flush of storybook romance. You feel a pragmatic sense of assessment. She looks strong. Her family's hut is well maintained. You feel a shared understanding of the life that awaits you both. It will be a partnership, a team, a pact against the overwhelming difficulty of the world. And in that shared pact, you hope something quiet and steady, something like love, might eventually find a place to grow. That practical, loveless marriage contract might require you to fetch your new bride from her village, or perhaps a pilgrimage to a distant shrine has been pledged in exchange for a child's recovery from illness. Whatever the reason, you find yourself facing one of the most daunting prospects of your life. You have to travel. For you, a journey of 20 miles is like an expedition to the moon. The mainstream fact of your existence is that it is intensely local. Most people are born, live their entire lives, and die within a 5-mile radius. To venture beyond this familiar territory is to step off the edge of your known world. There are no reliable maps for you, no friendly blue dot showing your progress. The roads are little more than deeply rutted dirt tracks, winding through dense forests and across open moors. In the rain, they transform into the same greedy mud that lines your village street, only deeper and more treacherous. A simple stream, swollen by a storm, can become an impassable torrent, forcing you to wait for days or risk a dangerous crossing. You navigate by landmarks, a particular bent oak tree, a distant hill, and by asking for directions from the few people you meet, whose accents sound strange and whose advice might be unreliable. Your travel plan is essentially to head in the general direction of your destination and hope for the best. You do not travel alone. To do so is to invite disaster. You join a small, huddled group of other travelers for mutual protection. A merchant with his pack mule, a couple of monks on their way to an abbey, another family like your own. For the dangers on these roads are not just natural. The deep, dark woods are rumored to be the haunt of bandits and outlaws, men made desperate by poverty or banished from their communities. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a twig, sends a jolt of fear through your party. And the people you meet can be just as dangerous. Strangers are viewed with deep suspicion. Arriving in a new village at dusk, you are met with hostile stares. They don't know you, and they assume the worst. You must find lodging at the local inn, a crowded, filthy, and noisy place. You sleep not in a private room, but on a straw-strewn floor in a common area, huddled together with a dozen other strangers, your small pouch of coins clutched tightly in your hand. The inn has a solid 1-star rating on Medieval TripAdvisor, mainly because there are no other options. There is a quirky form of protection, however, should you run afoul of the law in a strange place. It's the right of sanctuary. A cornerstone of church law, it meant that if a fugitive could reach a church and physically take hold of a part of it, the altar, or sometimes a special sanctuary knocker on the door, they were granted temporary immunity from arrest, often for 40 days. It was a desperate gambit, a frantic race to holy ground to escape secular justice. As you huddle with your group around a meager campfire at night, listening to the howling of wolves in the distance, you wonder what the greater threat really is. Historians still argue whether the medieval traveler's greatest fear should have been the romanticized highwayman or the more mundane, and likely more common, dangers of a sprained ankle, a festering blister, a bout of dysentery from foul water, or simply getting hopelessly lost. The truth is, the entire endeavor is fraught with peril. The world outside your village is vast, chaotic, and utterly indifferent to your survival. You just pray for the sight of a familiar landmark, for the end of this terrifying journey. You finally make it back from your journey, your feet sore, your nerves frayed. You are home, safe within the familiar confines of your village. But the fears that haunted you on the road, the dark, whispering forests, the strange shadows at the edge of the firelight, do not entirely disappear. They simply change their form. For you do not live in a world of pure, cold reason. You live in a world that is alive with magic, spirits, and monsters. The line between the natural and the supernatural is thin and often non-existent. The forest that borders your village is not just a collection of trees and animals. It is a place of power, the domain of forces that are not human. At night, you believe goblins and sprites emerge to cause mischief, tangling your fishing lines or souring the milk. Blaming a misplaced axe on a goblin is the most logical explanation you have. You believe in fairies, but these are not the tiny, glittering creatures of modern cartoons. They are the good folk, powerful, proud, and easily offended beings who might steal away a beautiful child or lead a traveler astray to their doom. They are your tiny, terrifying, and invisible landlords, and you must appease them. This belief system, a blend of official Christian doctrine and much older pagan folklore, is the mainstream reality of your worldview. The priest may preach of angels and demons, but you also believe in the little magics that govern daily life. You, knock on wood, to ward off bad luck after saying something hopeful. You carry a lucky charm, perhaps a smooth stone with a natural hole in it, to protect you from ill will. Your home security system is a bundle of herbs hung over the door and a bit of salt sprinkled on the threshold. Some of these beliefs are truly heartbreaking. Take the quirky and tragic idea of the changeling. If a newborn baby is sickly, or colicky, or suffers from a disability you have no way of understanding, it is sometimes whispered that this is not your real child. The belief is that the fairies crept in and stole your healthy human baby, leaving one of their own non-human infants, a changeling, in its place. This deeply sad folklore was a way for people to rationalize the crushing grief of infant mortality and congenital disorders in a world without medical explanations. The air itself can be a source of danger. You believe in elf-shot, the idea that a sudden, sharp pain in your muscle or a debilitating illness is caused by an invisible arrow fired at you by a malicious elf. A whole host of ailments are blamed on such supernatural attacks. Was your neighbor's sudden death from the plague, or was he the victim of a witch's curse? Was the cow's failure to give milk a natural occurrence, or the result of an evil eye cast upon it by an envious neighbor? This constant presence of the supernatural raises a difficult question. Historians still argue whether this deep-seated belief in magic and folklore was ultimately a source of comfort for people, providing explanations and a sense of control in a random, chaotic world, or if it was primarily a source of deep anxiety, fueling paranoia and the deadly accusations of witchcraft that would become more common in later centuries. For you, it is likely both. It is comforting to have a reason for why the crops failed, but it is terrifying to think your neighbor might be the cause. You live your life carefully, trying not to offend the priest, the Lord, or the unseen things that live just beyond the firelight in the deep, dark woods. The years wear on. The seasons turn, each one etching deeper lines onto your face and adding a new stiffness to your joints. You have survived plagues, famines, levees, and the myriad dangers of a harsh world. You look at your gnarled hands, testament to a lifetime of grueling physical labor. You have reached the ripe old age of 40. In your time, this makes you an elder. Your friends from childhood are mostly gone, taken by sickness, accident, or childbirth. Your body is a map of your life's hardships, the dull ache in your back that never leaves, the teeth that have rotted away, the fading eyesight. Your big 40 and over birthday party is less a celebration and more a quiet acknowledgement that you are, quite literally, over the hill and heading down the other side. The most profound historical fact that shapes your final years is the brutal reality of life expectancy. At birth, your chances of reaching adulthood were frighteningly slim. The average life expectancy was only around 30 or 35, a number dragged down by the staggering rates of infant and child mortality. You have seen it firsthand. You and your spouse have likely brought several children into the world, but have also stood over the tiny graves of at least one or two of them, a grief so common it is an expected part of life. But if you were tough or lucky enough to survive the gauntlet of childhood, you had a decent chance of living into your 50s or even 60s. A long life, however, was not a comfortable one. It was a slow, painful process of wearing out. Your primary concern now is not about living, but about dying well. A sudden end, an accident in the field, a swift and unexpected sickness, is your greatest fear, as it would leave you no time to prepare your soul for the journey into the afterlife. The ideal is a good death, to die in your own bed, surrounded by your family. You would confess your sins to the priest one last time, receive the final sacrament of extreme unction, and pass away peacefully, your spiritual affairs in perfect order. To help people navigate this final, crucial moment, a quirky and popular type of book emerged, known as the Ars Moriendi, or The Art of Dying. These texts, often filled with vivid illustrations, were how-to guides for the deathbed. They detailed the 5 temptations the dying person would face: lack of faith, despair, impatience, spiritual pride, and avarice, and offered the proper prayers and meditations to overcome them. It was the most important instruction manual you would ever read, and you only got one chance to use it correctly. As you sit by the fire in your small, smoky hut, you reflect on a life of struggle. You were born in this hut, you will die in this hut. Your world has been small, your comforts few, your sorrows many. Did this constant proximity to death and hardship make you callous, or did it make you cherish the small moments of beauty more fiercely? Historians still argue whether the medieval mindset was one of grim, desensitized resignation, or if the fragility of life fostered a profound and desperate spirituality. Perhaps the answer is in the way you look at your grandchildren tumbling on the floor, a fierce, protective love that is sharpened, not dulled, by the knowledge of how easily they could be lost. Your retirement plan is a quiet spot in the churchyard, and you have made your peace with that. You have worked hard, you have endured, and now you are tired. The world around you begins to soften now, the sharp edges of hardship giving way to a gentle, drifting haze. The feeling of the rough straw pallet beneath you, the smoky scent of the fire, the persistent, damp chill in the air, let it all begin to fade. That life of constant toil, of mud and fear and fleeting joys, was a world away, 1,000 years ago. The anxieties of the harvest, the demands of the Lord, the fear of the deep, dark woods, they are not your anxieties. They are just echoes, whispers from a time long past, a story that has now been told. You can feel the weight of that life lifting from your shoulders, replaced by the comfortable weight of your own blanket in your own quiet, peaceful room. The world of the past recedes, becoming a distant, half-remembered dream, and your own soft, warm bed comes into focus, inviting you to rest, to release the day, and to sink into a deep and well-deserved sleep. There is no work to be done at sunrise, no fear of what the darkness holds. There is only rest,